speaking to this resource, and I love the fact that you brought in how Gunnison Trails is not just mountain biking trails. Like that is potentially a little bit of a myth still. And so, the more we can do, it's really broader from what I'm hearing in this conversation, and it's all trails. And these trails are certainly a resource for not just the folks that live here, but the folks that travel and that are seeking this recreation. Like, secrets out, we have world-class trails around here, like really world-class.
Welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Kugler garage doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today, I've got a really great friend of mine, Tim Kugler. He's the executive director for Gunnison Trails here in the Gunnison Valley. And I'm excited for this conversation. I've got some questions. I'm going to open up my brain and learn a little bit more about Gunnison Trails and recreation in general. Tim, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, good morning, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Are you beaming in from a home office here in Gunnison?
I am actually beaming in from a home office up in Crested Butte South,
Awesome.
Which is where we're living temporarily before relocating back to Gunnison.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get into Gunnison Trails and the evolution of this organization, kind of the why behind it. But before we do, I want to just build some context for listeners. Where did you grow up, Tim?
I am from Alexandria, Virginia, which is about 15 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. On the Virginia side.
Right on.
Born in 1983, and my parents are still back east in the original house I grew up in, and I'm one of 5 kiddos, and my siblings are kind of spread out all across the U.S., so most of us kind of headed west after college.
Cool. Where do you fall in the 5? Are you middle, baby?
In the pecking order, I've got 3 older brothers, and then there's myself, and then we all have a younger sister. So
cool.
The running joke in the family is my parents just kind of kept trying until they got their daughter.
Right on. And how did it progress? So Virginia into Gunnison. Give us the snapshot there, how that unfolded.
I was really fortunate to go to school in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is kind of in central Virginia, right at the foothills in the Shenandoah Mountains. And that was sort of my first taste of, I hate to say rural's not the right word, but Charlottesville at the time was probably a town of, 100,000 people maybe.
Okay.
Decent sized college town. And just a really, coming from the DC area where everything's kind of paved and there's shopping malls and it's just busy. Charlottesville kind of gave me my first glimpse of sort of, mountains and it's certainly not in the mountains, but pretty close by. It's right in the foothills there. Man, I'm going to have to, can I stop that real quick?
You're blowing up.
You hear that on your end? Okay, hang on one sec.
It's not that
Pause.
bad. People do it all the time.
I know, but... Oh, okay, the pause, you mean? Okay, stand by.
This will be the cover photo though, just you like zooming in, zoning in on high focus.
I love it. I know, right? My eyeballs doing this. Okay, turning that off. Messages. Email. Your listeners can just see how like crazy popular I am. Just the constant bing, bing. Mail, messages. All right, we'll see if that's any better. Do you want to revert back to anything? Pick up where I left off?
Yeah, you kind of stopped midstream there. So you were talking about Charlottesville.
Yeah. Charlottesville, it's It's an amazing town. It sits, like I said, right in the foothills of the Shenandoah Mountains. And that was kind of when I got into mountain biking. My brother John was actually in med school at the University of Virginia when I started there as an undergrad. So he kind of took me under his wing, kind of introduced me to mountain biking and trail running. And I just was hooked on getting out and getting after it in the woods. And so from there, when I graduated, I chased my brother Mike out to Truckee, California, where he was living. So right in the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
And I was out there for about 2 years, and then I actually relocated to Crested Butte. And my trip there was, I had passed through on a cross country drive a couple of years prior, and I rode Reno Flag Bear Dead Man's Trail Loop, which is up Cement Creek. I think I saw a black bear. I saw a raccoon the size of our 35-pound Aussie Shepherd. I was just like, abundant wildlife, and I was just sort of hooked and was like, I got to move. So the next summer I moved here in July to Crested Butte, and I haven't left the valley since. That was in 2008.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Kugler Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommar Garage Door Openers. In our opinion, Sommars are the highest quality product on the market today. We recommend them for all of our residential garage door installs because of the variety of features they include, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features such as a fixed chain, which moves along a secure rail to ensure your garage door opens quietly and safely. Click on the link in the description to learn more about Sommar Garage Door Openers.
Right on. So did you move without a job? You were just like, I need to go to this place. The raccoons are amazing.
I was actually, in hindsight, I was actually pretty responsible. I had lined up a job as a bike mechanic at Big Al's Bicycle Heaven. So that was my first job. I did move here without any sort of housing setup. And I was actually fortunate. I camped out Slate River Road for a month, which is not really feasible this day and age. Like that was in July, and I felt like I had that whole drainage to myself for what is now a very busy time of year in the Crested Butte Valley or in the Gunnison Valley. And Lower Loop Trail was my commute to work, and so it was just sort of it was like heaven.
The good old days.
Yeah. I know it's funny to be able to say that now. I always kind of laughed at folks that said that, but that's sort of my one thing I can point to in my life where I've seen pretty dramatic change is what I was able to do when I moved here in 2008. And now if you try and camp up the Slate drainage in July, you kind of, there's very little options for that unless you've gotten here, and set up camp well ahead of time, well ahead of the weekend.
Yeah.
It's just always busy.
Yeah, no, I get that. So then you got involved, I guess, when did you get involved with Gunnison Trails? And we can just open this up a little bit broader too and keep you talking. So when did you get involved with Gunnison Trails? And then give us that little snapshot of history for the organization.
Yeah. I actually first got involved with trail maintenance and trail building locally with the Crested Butte Mountain Bike Association. So they're a nonprofit trail advocacy group. They actually boast being the oldest mountain bike club in the world. They started in 1983. So I joined their board of directors in 2012, I believe, and I was a board member with them for 5 years. So 2012 to 2017. I went back to graduate school at Western. They have a really cool master's in environmental management program, which
awesome.
I was the second graduating class of that. So my wife and I moved down to Gunnison in 2015 so I could start graduate study there. And then it was really serendipitous right around the time I got my master's in sort of, I did sort of like a baseline study of our trail reports or rather trail plans here in the county. So, different municipalities have trail plans, and then the local organizations have their trail plans, and kind of did a study of how well those interface and whether or not there's sort of like a big overarching big picture plan that kind of encompasses all those, or if everyone's just sort of putting out their own ideas. And I wrapped that up in 2017, and it was right around the time when the Dave Wiens, who founded Gunnison Trails, he was moving on to he is now the director of the International Mountain Bike Association. So that executive director position opened up with Gunnison Trails, and it was just very much right place, right time. And fortunate for me, I had been sort of in that sort of nonprofit trail world for a number of years now. So I sort of knew quite a bit about the local trail advocacy scene. And a little history on Gunnison Trails. It was founded in 2006 by Dave Wiens, and it was, from its inception, it was basically a way to assist our Bureau of Land Management, so the public land management agency that takes care of a lot of the public lands around Gunnison. We're fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of BLM land and then also a lot of Forest Service land. And one of our most popular trail networks, Hartman Rocks, which is just a couple miles south of Gunnison, and boasts about 45 miles of trail. That network has kind of been an evolution where it used to be, this was before my time, but I always hear folks say, back in the day, you'd go out there and that's where people would take, pickup trucks worth of old washing machines and refrigerators. It was just kind of the dumping ground. A lot of old tires. And through a lot of local effort, it's been cleaned up. And then some of the sort of historic user-created trails were sort of adopted into a managed system by the BLM. And Gunnison Trails kind of came along to assist the BLM in sort of maintaining those trails. And it's, I've been fortunate to ride and hike in a lot of different places, but not by any stretch as much as some other folks from around here. And everyone always returns to how fortunate we are to have a network of trails like that, like right close in proximity to Gunnison. It's just really cool, exposed granite boulders and rolling sort of sage covered hills and just really unique trail network that to this day I don't think we could build a network. If we were given that blank canvas again, I think it'd be really hard to recreate the trails that are out there. They're just they've just evolved through time, and each one is unique and uses the terrain really exceptionally well. It's just an amazing network that I feel really lucky to now kind of inherit the stewardship of.
This is good. And I guess for my understanding and listeners, like Gunnison Trails, so what I'm hearing is an advocate for trails, also a bit of a steward, a manager in partnership with land managers like the Bureau of Land BLM.
There you go. Just use your acronyms.
And in our county, I mean, we have, 80+% is public land, mix of BLM, which is probably the primary, and National Park and Forest Service.
I mean, it's it's wild. The Western U.S. has, the majority of the public lands in the U.S., but you look at some of these sort of more rural counties like Gunnison, and we have something like 80, I've heard like anywhere from 80 to 83% public lands, which is, from like a recreation tourism standpoint, those are, that's gold for us. That's just a lot of folks come here to use those lands and experience those lands.
And that user is varied. I mean, we have hunting, fishing, hiking, biking, horse, right? And all these users, they don't always get along. There's sometimes conflicts.
Completely. And I would say we're still really fortunate in that we have, not only do we have an immense amount of public land, but we also have a lot of trails that access that public land. Like we still have the ability to spread out a lot of users. So that's not to say there's not conflict or even just kind of degradation to the resource from the amount of people coming. Right. But, you look at areas, folks will always say like in July, like, oh my God, Crested Butte is just overwhelming. It's so busy. And those same visitors kind of laugh and they're like, are you kidding me? This place is like super sleepy. So it's also a perspective thing. Like if you're coming from, maybe an area on the Front Range of Colorado where it's just, you go to any given trailhead and you're going to fight for parking.
Right.
Some of those issues we're still, that's not to say we aren't seeing some of those sort of trailhead congestion issues, but it's at a different scale to some of these other places, and we're really lucky in that sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, we definitely deal. There's been in 2017 or 2018, I'm going to get those dates wrong. The county convened sort of a working group of public land managers and recreation entities, various nonprofits, and then other just sort of citizens, called the Sustainable Tourism and Outdoor Recreation Committee. And that committee, has kind of been tasked with helping manage our recreation and do so in a way that sort of protects the resource. So it's not necessarily saying our sort of recreational tourism is bad. It's more, let's get in front of some of the problems that we've seen crop up in other areas. And that committee's been really successful in kind of managing some of the conflicts that can arise or some of the degradation that we've seen from increased tourism. And I kind of point to that committee as solving a lot of, or at least helping mitigate a lot of those sort of user created conflicts that can come up and in other areas.
Yeah. What would it be like if Gunnison Trails was not around, if it never formed? Like how
chaos, utter chaos out there.
It'd be like pirated,
that's a really good question.
Pirated trails and maybe lost access and like
Yeah, I would say, we do, we spend a lot of time doing trail maintenance, just like basic trail maintenance. It's not the most, a lot of trail users are always looking for the next new piece of trail that's going to be built. Like, oh, what's new this summer? And we have been fortunate to build some new trail behind the college in that area called Signal Peak. But
it's beautiful.
For the most part, most of our most of our time is spent just maintaining the trails that we have. And I have gone to a lot of areas that don't have an organization like Gunnison Trails or the Crescent Butte Mountain Bike Association that is kind of out there maintaining the resource sort of at a full-time capacity all summer. And it's just night and day to see the difference in sort of the overall trail experience. So, trails like anything need constant upkeep. They erode from natural conditions, so rain and snow. And then obviously the more users you have on those trails, they also bring their own impact. So it's sort of this, it's great job security. As long as you have trails and people are using them, you need to maintain them. And unfortunately, our land management agencies, so the Forest Service and BLM, they've just kind of seen a lot of their recreational budgets cut in the last, several decades. So in a way, they sort of look to groups like ours as a solid partner. So they can reliably count on Gunnison Trails to help just do this basic maintenance that's needed every year. So, without a Gunnison Trails, there's lots of communities that maybe don't have the same, capacity for a group like ours. And it just shows in sort of the quality of the trails. We also are able to put resources looking towards new trail development, which is always really exciting. And then, and we've also, the evolution of Gunnison Trails, which I kind of mentioned earlier, when we started out, it was 100% Hartman rocks, because that was sort of the trail system that was on the ground and needed maintenance. And since then, we've got a 20-mile trail system in Signal Peak that's relatively new. And then with our trail crew, which I'll touch on that in a minute, we now spend pretty much half of our trail work season, so about 1,500 hours we spend just maintaining wilderness trails that are surrounding Gunnison. So a lot of people kind of peg Gunnison Trails as a sort of a mountain bike organization, which is fair. We definitely love our mountain bike trails, and a lot of the trails around Gunnison, so Hartman Rocks and Signal Peak, are open to mountain bikes, and they're sort of built to that mountain bike spec. But we spend an equal amount of time working on trails where mountain bikes aren't allowed. And they're, for me, that's sort of probably the most rewarding part of my job, because these are trails that have been on the ground since the days of mining and the CCC, so 1920s and 30s. And they're just, again, trails in today's climate would be really hard to put in the places they are. They just go through these amazing areas. And so to be able to kind of steward those and maintain them for generations it's just really special for myself and our organization to be able to do that.
There's a couple of things I love. and I love your passion for it, and you keep referencing stewardship, and I think that's beautiful. I think we got the right guy in the right seat. Like, good job. And
Thanks.
you're speaking to this resource, and I love the fact that you brought in how Gunnison Trails is not just mountain biking trails. Like, that is potentially a little bit of a myth still. And so, the more we can do, it's really broader from what I'm hearing in this conversation, and it's all trails. And these trails are certainly a resource for not just the folks that live here, but the folks that travel and that are seeking this recreation. Like, secrets out, we have world-class trails around here, like really world-class. And that's a beautiful thing. My question for you is, referencing my past history, when you were 5 years old, Tim, I got into mountain biking. I bought my first Schwinn Verada, I think it was what's the deal? Saved up my paper route money, and I bought a mountain bike. And my buddies and I would go out behind the old insane asylum in Traverse City, and we would build trails. And we named them, and they're still alive today with the names on them. Are there people that go around Crested Butte, Gunnison, and we're just pirating trails? What's the cost or the benefit? And is there any enforcement around there? It's just my curiosity, just because of my upbringing. Like, I was a hack, by the way. Like, our trail building skills was like, we weren't there, but I'm just curious.
You got to start. You got to start somewhere, right?
Have to start somewhere.
No, I mean, I would say, mountain biking is a young sport. It hasn't been around forever. And part of that culture is sort of that sort of rogue trail building. Back in the day when Hartman's was kind of first getting put on the map, a lot of those trails were from just that, someone going out with a shovel and putting a trail on the ground, and or riding a moto through the sage and kind of burning in a trail. So that's very much like ingrained in our in the mountain bike culture, and that's like, you can agree or disagree with it, but that's just kind of the way it is. But it has evolved. Like, today, if every young kid who got a bike wanted to go out and dig a new trail, we just don't have the resource for that anymore. Like, there are enough people on the landscape, and we've sort of, developed a lot of the landscape in such a way that we're finding that we found the limits, if you will. So yeah, there's always going to be rogue trail building that goes on. But, for us as a sort of an educational outreach organization, we certainly can't condone that. We know it's kind of part of that culture, but a lot of that goes into, a lot of our work goes into not only sort of trying to show folks, not just saying no and say like, hey, you're going to get prosecuted or going after, like, we're not really policing that sort of activity,
right? But
at least what I can try and do, and what Gunnison Trails can try and do, is just show why that, sort of new trail development, why the process, the hoops that we have to jump through as an organization, why those are important. And it, to the 16-year-old teenager that just wants to go out and build a sweet trail and ride his bike, like, some of my spiel is going to kind of fall on deaf ears, because I get that they want to build their own creation, and maybe having an area where that's sort of okay is not a bad idea to kind of scratch that itch of the young kid that wants to go build trail. But certainly I think it really helps when people can kind of understand the big picture of all the users out there on the landscape, and why a trail that might be really rad for you and your buddies has these other impacts that you might not be able to fathom in sort of your small, the lens that you look through.
Yeah.
And that goes for all users. There's so many trail users that just, their experience is kind of what dictates who they can relate to, and how they want to use the trails, and how they want to sort of have their outdoor experience. And it's really unfortunate, because we have a lot of varied trail users here, and the more people can relate to the other user, the better off the landscape and just people getting along out there is going to be. So there's a lot of animosity between silent users and people who might just want to hike and they're going to turn their nose up at a mountain biker. And same thing, I know plenty of mountain bikers that can't stand the sound or sight of a moto. And then you've got equestrians and hunters, and it's a really varied landscape. And nothing helps more than when folks can kind of relate to their other trail user. Doesn't mean they have to go out and buy a moto, but being able to relate to that other user group is it just goes really far in getting folks to cooperate a little bit.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. I'm hearing power in the big picture, just seeing a larger picture and seeing how partnerships, and I mean, I can just think of, if I was to go out and hack a trail, like that just creates an erosion issue. and the trails that are maintained and out there, like they take a lot of that into account, and it's a very user, it's erosion, it's natural resource, it's taking into account the big picture.
Yeah. And, there's plenty of areas where, based on the kind of local climate and geology, like a really steep, gnarly trail might actually, I wouldn't call that like sustainable, but it might not erode at the same rate as, say, a trail here in Gunnison. The other thing that I constantly, there's a lot of places that have been sort of denuded of their wildlife, and they have, whether it's just like huge development everywhere, or people on the landscape forever, but they just have, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say accepted, but there's just more of a culture of that kind of trails everywhere. And even though, a lot of folks would say we have trails everywhere here, and we have trails, in every drainage, pretty much on every peak, but we're still really fortunate where we live to have like intact, healthy wildlife populations. And so finding that balancing act between, trails and recreational trail use and still sustaining sort of this other immensely important resource is something unique to certainly where we live here. And and that's kind of a challenge, but also, I think a lot of us live here because of that sort of the wildness that we still have out our back door.
Yeah, I love it. What's on the horizon? What are we excited for? Any big trails in development or?
Yeah. We kind of mentioned Signal Peak earlier. That was, we proposed a trail development plan in an area of Signal Peak, which is right behind the college. It's like a 15,000 acre chunk of BLM land that's always had sort of historic use on it. But it didn't have an official sort of managed trail system until our plan was approved with the BLM in 2018. So that sort of adopted a little over 7 miles of trail that were kind of, always used over the years, but that sort of made them official, if you will.
Yeah.
And then it also allowed us to build an additional, I think at this point it's like 20 miles of trail. And we've been chipping away at that. Now there's a little over, if you combine in those 7 miles, I think there's a little over 22 miles of trail out there. We've been averaging about 3 miles of trail a summer, constructing 3 new miles of trail a summer, which has been really, really amazing opportunity for our organization. And this summer we're hoping to add on another 2 miles to a trail we finished last year called Sunny D. So this new trail will climb up to, it'll pretty much be the trail furthest out in the system. So in the far like northeast corner of the system, and that'll provide some connectivity back to some trails that have been on the ground forever.
Cool.
Which will be really cool. So that's sort of our big fall plans. And then we also run a 5-person trail crew all summer long, and that crew is going to be doing a bunch of different projects, but we kind of start with trail maintenance in the low country, so Signal and Hartman Rocks early on in the spring, and then as the sort of the higher mountains melt out, we kind of move up into the forest and start maintaining some trails in the West Elk Wilderness. This year we're hoping to get a contract with the Forest Service to do 5 to 6 weeks of work on a trail, the South Lotus Trail. You been on that one before?
I have. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's in the Fossil Ridge Wilderness and is an amazing trail.
Yeah.
It goes by a couple of really cool lakes, and that needs it's due for some heavy maintenance. So just some projects that you can go in and clear to down trees every year, but some of those sort of projects that might take a little bit longer just start to kind of pile up until you can really devote some time and resources to it.
Yeah.
So hopefully our crew will be in there working in a pretty, like, one of the coolest spots in the county for 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we actually just, the Colorado Trail Foundation, we're really lucky too, where Gunnison sits, the Colorado Trail, which is a long distance trail over 500 miles in length from Denver to Durango. A big portion of that goes through Gunnison County and sits just to our south. And they have various trail adopters that kind of help them maintain different sections. And they reached out to us about seeing if we could adopt a section or two. So that'll be kind of cool to have our own little, adopt a section of trail with the Colorado Trail.
Yeah.
And that one's just, again, kind of speaking to some of these sort of like iconic historical trails. That one is like particularly special.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So yeah, that's definitely, that email came through last week and that got me pretty excited to have that opportunity.
That's cool. Is there any work development from Gunnison and Crested Butte Trail? I've heard rumors of
that
this
one's
over the
always
years.
been like Gunni Trails. When we started, we had our kind of three big picture ideas, Trails and Signal Peak, a Northwest trail system. So kind of right off the Van Tile trails that sit in town.
That'd be cool.
DLM land kind of comes right down to the Gunnison River there.
Yeah.
So we've always kind of envisioned a trail system sort of in that corner that would maybe connect out to like the Mill Creek drainage, which is a really popular access point for the West Elk Wilderness. And then Gunni to CB was, we kind of have a route posed, and there's all sorts of wildlife hurdles with that one. So that one's always just been like, an idea we'd love to see happen, but it's one that I think it would, we don't have any sort of, we don't have a plan in the works right now for that one. It's just sort of still just kind of big picture idea.
Yeah, I got you. Well, close this out here. I want to know, I mean, obviously, maybe not obvious to all our listeners, but Gunnison Trails is a heavily volunteer-driven association. And how can people reach out, get in touch with you, and get involved with the work that you guys are doing?
Yeah, we, I kind of highlighted our trail crew, but the bread and butter of the organization is still our volunteer trail work days, which we do starting in the spring. So as soon as the trails at Hartman Rocks open, we're usually out there just doing weekly maintenance. So we do something called Trail Work Tuesdays. It usually averages maybe every other Tuesday in the spring and fall, where we meet at about 4 p.m., work till about 7 p.m. And then afterwards we enjoy libations from our local brewery, High Alpine Brewing. And we grill some weenies and just kind of hang out. To find out about that, we post stuff to our socials. And then I always send out an email to our membership base, and it's easy to sign up for those. If you go to our website, a little window will pop up on the home screen and ask if you want to join our email list. And we don't send out a ton, but that's like the best way for us to kind of keep in touch with folks.
Awesome.
And yeah, those weekly opportunities are, they're just fun. You get to see like, just the kooky trail loving folks in the community that love nothing more than coming out and helping maintain the resource. And it's how I got into it. I started maintaining trails in college, and it was, it's fun work. But at the end of the day, it's like the personalities that come out and just like that sense of community that you get, is what keeps people coming back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's certainly, we encourage folks to come on out and lend a hand. It's always a good time.
Yeah. I love it, man. We'll definitely include your social links for Gunnison Trails and website information there. And then, I also heard like people can become members. And that's a big piece of support. And I would definitely encourage people to check out getting involved with Gunnison Trails. And
thanks, man.
Yeah. Tim, any final closing thoughts?
Man, I just appreciate you having me on and shining a little light on Gunnison Trails, and yeah, thank you. Thanks for highlighting all the different players in this community and beyond. And yeah, I hope if listeners have any questions, I'm easy to reach. So yeah, feel free to reach out and contact.
Yeah, I love it, man. I appreciate you. We don't hang out often enough to play ping pong.
We didn't even talk ping pong.
No,
I thought we'd at least
at
least half this would be talking smack about ping pong.
We'll gear up another time, but we are due for a couple good games there, my friend. And
we are.
I'm glad that we had this time to connect. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on.